recording this podcast, I'm gonna take a Snapchat video of how lazy I am and that I'm laying down. And I also just realized that I heard you click the button, and now that means we're definitely recording.
Yep. So your song will come in right after the theme song.
My song is great. It's so good.
It is great. It's great. So we're going to keep it in, and we're going to jump right into our episode. And I guess first we need to get out of the way. It is late on Sunday night.
It is so past my bedtime.
It's so late. We don't usually record this late, but we were trying to find a time that worked for all parties involved, and it turns out that time is later than normal. So here we are. It is after 9 p.m. It was a long weekend. Friday and Saturday, we both spent in the Madison area for the WFCA state tournament. We have so much to talk about. So let's just jump in. Let's start. Why don't you start by telling me how your Friday started? Because you got started way before I did.
Well, first of all, I'm not going to jump in. I will gently step my way forward to tell you that I woke up at 5 o'clock on Friday morning to get ready to drive a minivan to pick up my Congress team. And then we drove to Madison. On the way to Madison, I made them listen to one of my favorite stories from My Favorite Murder, the podcast. It's not like one of the creepy, awful stories. It's about the Galapagos incident, which is a great story and is very fun. And if you ever want me to retell it to you in person, I will, because I love talking about it. But then
I think I actually know about this. I think this was featured on something else that I listened to.
Oh, probably. It's a super, super interesting story. But
was it also a documentary?
Yes.
Okay. Another podcast that I listened to, True Crime Obsessed, talked about this.
Perfect. It's a great story, y'all. Look it up.
Was it like a crazy doctor talked some German woman into coming and staying in the Galapagos Islands and living off the grid?
Yes, but the craziest
she
part
had serious health issues.
She had multiple sclerosis.
Yeah. Okay.
But the craziest part is the teeth. Okay, now I just have to talk about it. So he believed in obsessive mastication, and he was a dentist doctor, but he overchewed to the point that he removed all of his teeth and had a set of stainless steel dentures for himself, straight up Bond villain creepy dentures. But after having moved to the island, he decided that it would be better for him and his crazy lover lady to also remove all of her teeth, but they were on this non-inhabited island, so they both just shared his pair of dentures.
Oh my god.
They just passed them back and forth during meals, and that mental image is crazy to me. And while I was telling you about this, my microphone fell on my face.
You're living the dream. Should we tell the audience that you're finally recording an episode of Forensics Faces laying down?
I'm completely supine. I am so flat in my bed, laying in the dark. But I woke up today so ill. I just can't imagine being any other position in any other place on Earth. But I made my students listen to that story at 7 o'clock in the morning while we drove to Madison. And then we arrived and we got to do congressional debate in the Capitol. And it was just so overwhelming. I've never been to the Capitol, ever. I've been to Madison plenty of times, but I've never been inside of the Capitol building, and it is so beautiful. Shout out to Mark Oddie from Alpaca, who is telling me fun facts about the Capitol building, because he's the kind of person who knows fun facts about the Capitol building. Did you know that the Wisconsin State Capitol building has the second largest Capitol dome in the nation?
No, I did not know that.
I know that now. Thanks, Mark Oddie. But
do we think Mark Oddie is the type of person who just knows that information, or is Mark Oddie the type of person who looks that information up before going to a place like the state capitol?
Oh, I think Mark Oddie is the kind of person who just reads books about those sorts of things. Mark Oddie thinks those sorts of things are interesting. Okay, but enough about Mark Oddie. Let's talk about how cool it was to see a bunch of high schoolers getting to experience what it feels like to actually apply what they're doing in congressional debate in the real space within which they would congressionally debate. Like, yes, we've gone to the Marquette Congress where we are in the city hall, but there's just something about being in the Capitol, and we're in this big circular room, and there's this incredibly beautiful glass ceiling above it. As we're doing the informational meeting, and then the kids got to go be dispersed to their separate chambers, and my chamber was a little hearing room, but it was still like a perfect circle, and it just felt very cool, and I just really liked it, and everyone just kept getting lost a bunch, and we all just bonded over that. And it was just a very cool, special thing to get to do. And as someone who does laud Congress in the way that I do Student Congressional Congress, that is, not necessarily our Congress in DC, but it just felt really, it was just another example of the last 2 days just filling my little heart so full. Just all the kids talking about how cool it was, and watching all the teams taking team photos, and everyone like pointing out all the little details about the architecture and the beauty of the building, but also people on tours just like stopping in the super session room and just watching the kids competing, just like random observers, like not necessarily knowing what was going on.
Wow.
And it was just cool because there's a bunch of teenagers in suits.
I'm surprised they let tourists come in. Well,
I
suppose there was no security.
Yeah, there were just some randos who were just sliding in and out of these doors to like these back observational sections, just watching, being very confused. But
next
I thought
time we'll
cool.
have to put up a sign.
Yes.
No, it
but
was
you came and took photos.
Cool. I showed up just to, so my role this weekend was to help Mike Tross procure images for his final slideshow that showed before the awards ceremony at the state tournament. And I've had computer problems this whole week. The computer that I record on for my audiobooks, it is a separate and special computer that I have just for that. It broke last week. I had to send it in to get fixed. It has been way more than the 3 to 5 days they said it would take to return it to me. So therefore, Friday, I was once again not being productive at home. So I was like, well, I may as well go early to at least get some photos of the congressional debaters so that they could also be included as part of the recap video and preserved for all time as part of the archive from 2019 state tournament. And I'm glad I did because, yeah, that building was so incredibly cool. And it did make it feel so much more special that Student Congress was happening in such an ornate and beautiful space. And I got some good shots out of it, too. So I was happy.
Yeah, it's Congress as a category kind of gets sort of passed over in our state. It's not nearly as big a deal as it is for other places in the nation. So to get to have the association in its own little way recognize the work that the students do by having our Congress director, Tim Scheffler, get us sponsored as an association to hold our event there, it just felt really good. And you could tell the kids felt really cool too, because normally people don't really take it very seriously, but it just felt nice to watch them see that we as the association were putting in the effort and the work to show them that we do take them seriously.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, if I assume that was all Tim Scheffler, and good on him because he did a great job of making that happen. And it was a uniquely cool experience. One that I hope we'll be able to do again in the future, even though state seems like it's going to be moving around a lot more than it has in the past. So very cool experience. Did you guys do anything fun on Friday night?
I mean, you could say that we did something a little interesting for our team bonding on Friday night. We normally have a giant team practice, but it just didn't feel like the thing to do this year. I really love my team. Like, as a whole, they just get along really well, and we just have a really great dynamic, and I just wanted to celebrate that and that chemistry. So we had a party similar to the one that we threw for Ben for his birthday, where me and the Nationals kids dressed up as different versions of him. But instead, the students drew each other's names at the team meeting on Monday and then spent the week getting together pieces for costumes to dress up as each other. And then we had a weird little like fashion show costume party in my hotel room. And it was great. I got to dress up as my student Kobe. I wore men's cargo shorts for 23 whole minutes on Friday.
That's more time than I've worn men's cargo shorts in the last 5 years.
But I was also like, so many of the people in the room, Ben included, were just telling me how weird it was to see me wearing shorts. Because I don't really wear them.
Right.
And then my student Mason got to dress up as me. And while his costume was not very referential, he was spot on in his recreation of my dance moves and my overall attitude as a person. But
your overall really what?
My overall attitude as a person.
Oh, okay. It was we just had a weird like internet and or computer glitch where all I heard was my dance moves and my overall and I was like, there's several ways that word could end.
It's definitely attitude. It's 100% attitude.
Okay.
Although he did have his twerk skills on legendary, as Lizzo would say, in the song Tempo, which he danced to as part of his costume reveal to me. But it was just very fun, and I highly recommend it if you have the sort of team where the kids will lean into that sort of thing and can do so in a really positive way, which everyone did. So it was very fun. And then I had all my kids in bed by 10.
That's awesome. I love that notion, though, that like you knew your team like would excel on Saturday, whether or not there was a practice, because the thing that makes them tick is that personal bond. Yep. And it's just one of those things where it's like, as a coach, you need to figure out what works for your people. Sometimes they're super close. Sometimes they are not. And so you got to be flexible. I like that.
It was very fun. And originally you were going to come and have a pre-state slumber party with me, but you decided that you dislike being around me so much that you would rather spend $33 to go hang out with other way cooler forensics teams who were staying way closer to the actual state tournament site.
That's one way you could classify what happened. Or I didn't want to have to coordinate taking a shower in the morning. And since I got such a good deal on a hotel room, I then spent the rest of the night alone. Because I wasn't hanging out with anybody. I just ran into other teams as they were checking into the hotel.
Even if you're just telling me that to make me feel better, I appreciate it.
No, that's true. I spent the rest of the night alone. So...
But then we were up and early on Saturday to go to my first time at DeForest.
Yeah, I had never been to DeForest either.
It felt very middle of nowhere.
Yeah, driving even from like the hotel in northern Madison to DeForest, I was like, where are we going?
Yep.
But I feel that same way like every time I drive from Green Bay to Sheboygan too. It's like it takes almost no time to go from city to just like rural expanse.
Yeah.
Like you go from city to farmland in almost no time. So it was not shocking to me, but it was a little bit like, oh, this is definitely more rural than I expected it to be. I guess I thought DeForest was more of just like a suburb of Madison.
Yeah.
And it's not far, but there's definitely a little bit of farmland in between. So I got to the school a little bit before 7, got to walk in and give, a big hug to Deb Tross and then go say hi to Mike and just kind of got my camera out and waited for teams to arrive. with some of the DeForest volunteers. And in that time, I also got to see Tom August, who was our tournament host. He is the coach from DeForest High School. And so he worked with, the whole executive board, but also with Mike Trost to make sure that the school, both the high school and the middle school, were ready for us for competition. And I also got to say hi to John Peschel, who was acting as in his role as sort of the assistant host of the tournament, since he had been so intimately involved in running the state tournament for so many years. And it was just, even those first few moments, it was like, people I haven't seen in forever. And it felt good, because that's what state is. Like, even the people you haven't seen all year, or the people you only see once a year, it was so exciting to see them and say hi. And then to like literally get to greet just about every single team as they got off their bus or drove up in their vans and walked into the school. So much fun.
Yeah. It would have been nice if I would have gotten to successfully have the photo that I made my student Raksha prepare and pseudo pose for when I saw that you were standing to greet schools, but instead you were talking to your former students from your team and being a nice former coach.
I apologize. And I told you
fluffed
this
my
already.
hair.
I told you this already. I was waiting for the Sheboygan people to show up so I could take their photos, because almost everybody that was walking by me was giving me this like weird look of like, why is this person taking my picture? Or they like just looked super tired after having ridden a bus at like super early hours in the morning. Or they were like trying to be like posy, which Mike gave me very strict instructions not to get anybody posing. And so I was like, but the Sheboygan people, they'll do me a solid, because they'll see me, they'll recognize me, they'll maybe even be happy to see me, so then they'll look like naturally happy. I was like, that'll be a great photo opportunity. And then I totally biffed it by talking to Mariah Irvin as she was coming up, and then like almost the whole North team went by me, and then Rachel stopped to talk to me, and that's apparently when you were walking up, and I missed it.
I literally was telling Raksha, I was like, okay, so Kurt's trying to get great photos for a thing that they're going to do that's similar to nationals. Spoiler alert. So what we're going to do you want to look like we're funny and laughing at something, or do you want to look like I'm motivating you? And she was like, I guess we can look funny. And I was like, okay. So, and then I began to fluff my hair, and I was like, you look great. Do I look great? And she was like, yes, very hesitantly. And I was like, all right, so we're going to walk towards Kurt, and we're going to look great, and we're going to look really fun and casual. And you didn't even acknowledge us, and we were like, okay, fine. And then she was like, all that build up for nothing. And I was like, I'm used to it.
I'm sorry. I did get pictures of Raksha later.
Yes.
And one of them appeared in the slideshow.
Yes.
So there you go.
I think she hated it.
I mean, it should be said.
She's a very introverted person. So
it should be said that I did not pick the photos that made it into the slideshow.
Yeah.
I just delivered all of the photos, and then some other human, his name is Gavin, picked the photos that went into the slideshow. So I'm not responsible for what made it in there. I'm just responsible for taking a lot of photos of a lot of different people.
Yeah, but you spent the day taking those photos, going between the sites. I was at the middle school tabbing. I was there with my tab partner, Rayan from Arrowhead, and it was lovely to get to hang out with her, because at her tournament, Steve separated us and kept me all to himself, as the rude person that Steve is. So we just got to bond all day, and I just got to fall deeply into how similar we are as people, because the further that we got into the day, the more we began to sing nearly everything we did. And it just was very heartwarming to not feel that weird. And then also Cole from the Eau Claire area was there, who I judged when he was a student. And now he's about to graduate.
5 minutes ago.
I know. He's about to graduate college.
Oh, gosh.
He's like a real teacher person. It's so gross. I mean, like, people are allowed to progress and age and mature and stuff, but, like, it's not what I want.
It's just, it makes us feel so old.
Yeah. And then also Dave and Doris were working the intake table. So it was just a nice little group of folks I got to hang out with and chat with and do stuff for. And yeah, then I came back to the high school and just ran back and forth doing any and everything that Mike Tross wanted me to do.
Yeah. I will freely admit that I got a little bored at times because when you're taking pictures, and especially we wanted to focus on the students, like the students in the morning, it was great. I was running around for a long time. But then as soon as the first round started, I tried to take a few like stealthy photos, through windows of kids performing. But the last thing I wanted was for them to notice that their photo was being taken and have them take that out of their performance.
Yeah.
So I only did it for round one, and I like refused to go back and take more at the high school. And then I was like kind of bored. So I was like just kind of walking around. I stopped in at the TPP room, or the Bud Hole, as I like to say.
Yep. And, we're going to get it going. It's the Bud Hole, everyone.
I chatted, with Ron and Mariah and Tom Harden, and Steve Schmid was in there. Steve, who turns out does not like having his photo taken. So I made sure to take plenty of them.
And you took an amazing photo of him.
I did.
Like, I know we already talked to Steve about this, but let's address it on the podcast because it's our podcast and we can. We adore Steve as a person, and Kirt just managed to encapsulate him well in a photograph. And I'm really jealous because I think I've only ever had one photo that good taken of me ever, and it's my profile photo on Facebook. So
you had some excellent photos taken of you when we did our photo shoot for the podcast.
Yeah, that's what that photo is from.
Oh, that one. I thought you were talking about.
It's the one of me saying, like, a photo that is my profile on Facebook was me, like, just posing to show our photographer Peyton that location is one that we'd used before. So it wasn't even actually a photo. I was just posing there for you, but she was like testing the lighting / taking it as a real photo, and it just actually turned out like a real great, nice photo.
Well, and much like that, this photo is just Steve walking towards Ryan and me, not realizing that his photo was being taken. And I feel like I captured the essence of Steve Schmidt if he was also a cast member of The West Wing.
100%. It was a walk and talk moment.
Yeah.
It was great.
It's a good photo. Steve, if you want it, let me know. I will send it to you. But you seem opposed to having your image captured by an electronic device. So if you don't want it,
maybe he's unworthy.
Okay,
if anything, at least send it to his wife.
Well, I don't know his wife, but I got Steve's wife. If you're listening, listen at forensicsfaces.com. That's the email. You get in touch. I'd love to
send you a picture of your husband.
And I will send you a few excellent photos of your husband. So this got weird.
Anyway, so it was a great time it was great going back over to the high school. So because this is our podcast, and because I know that people do genuinely want this from others, I would like to talk about my first criticism of the state tournament.
I'm not going to stop you.
The first piece of feedback that I got from my students when we were talking about things that they loved and didn't like was the lunch.
Oh.
I appreciated all of the side options, carrots and apples, as well as chips. But like my veggie option, once I removed the cheese, was just a piece of lettuce and 2 tomatoes. And my students who are also vegetarian and one who is lactose intolerant and vegetarian were just like, well, I didn't realize that this wasn't really going to be that great of an option. So I'm just saying that's my feedback. And yes, I fully take responsibility for the fact that if I wanted very specific food, I could pack my own lunches and bring my own lunches and that sort of thing. But I just wanted to say that in a tournament that had plenty of beautiful, amazing things, the great spread they had for the judges outside of the judges meeting in the morning, and the spread that they had over at the middle school were great, but the lunch option was subpar for me.
Okay. I don't know.
First feedback.
And I'm not saying that feedback is invalid.
Yeah.
Oh man, starting that sentence that way makes this sound so
so mansplaining.
I know. But I want you to know I'm hearing that as well. But I'm also thinking we probably won't hold the state tournament at DeForest again, within 5 years, if ever.
Yeah.
So like next year, the food situation will be totally different because we're in a totally different location.
But I
So
just
I'm
hope
not
that,
sure that there's much
so
that can
then
be done
here, I
about
hope that Scott is listening and Scott thinks about and considers the fact that for a lot of us, we are going to eat that lunch option and then we won't eat again until after the awards ceremony, which doesn't finish up until about 6:30. And then we stop somewhere for dinner on the way back. So some of us aren't eating again until 7. So taking into consideration the lunch options and concession availabilities for students that ensure that they have enough access to food or eating a type of food that properly fills them up for the day. Because my students are always told they have to bring a second snack is called their award ceremony snack that they eat while they're waiting for the award ceremony to start to get them through to that point. But not everyone does that.
No.
And then there are like those kids that just look cranky and sad when they're on the stage. And it's like, you're totally stoked that you're in finals, but you're also hungry right now.
True. But I will say too, probably the only way that somebody can control that situation is to do what you said, which is to bring your own food, which I saw several teams do, including Appleton West, who had like an unbelievable spread. Like they had several crock pots out. They were making like hot sandwiches and they had fresh fruit. They were making smoothies at their table.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. And like Becky Henning like invited me to come and like eat with them. Like they had extras. They were very well set up and being very generous. Because they looked at the box lunch option and thought, you know, it would cost us less money to just ask parents to like donate food that we could bring with us. And then they had this whole amazing spread. And so their kids were well fed.
Dang.
I saw a few other people like ordered pizzas or ordered Jimmy John's. Yes, I mean, not only Scott next year, but also like the entire team, the entire executive board of the WFCA can also help to remember that like the food is an important aspect of the day. But also, coaches, if you want to really make sure your kids are well fed, probably the only way to do it is to bring your own food or arrange for your own food.
True.
Which, by the way, if I was still coaching, I would not do. Like, full disclosure, I'd be like, eat your crappy box lunch. It's fine. It's calories. That's what your body's looking for. Sometimes food is fuel. Just eat it. It is easier to pay the $6 to the state rather than trying to coordinate an entire other option for you. God bless. Amen. You don't, as I literally said to some of my former North students when they were talking to me about the box lunches, I was like, nobody comes to state for a great dining experience. Just eat your food.
That's fair. And it's not like they were bad. They were just like, it wasn't sustenance. But enough about the food. Let's talk about other things that were great / wonderful / fun.
This is where like the thing that I was doing didn't allow me to like really take part in state as I normally would. I was very much like on the outskirts. So like as far as like the way the tournament itself officially ran, I think everything went well. But like I was mostly just an observer and I wasn't helping all that much. I literally helped to enter one ballot in the tab room because it was at a moment when I was there just visiting with people. And then the entire executive, like the elected members of the executive board had to go deliberate on a TPP appeal. And so it was just me and John Balsaric in the room. And then like a ballot came in. So I was like, well, I guess I'll help you enter this one ballot. And that was the only useful thing I did for the entire tournament. At one point towards the end of the day, we were having trouble getting some images off of the iCloud account of the other person who was taking photos with us. And I looked to Gavin, who was at the computer doing the video. And I said to him, I was like, take some comfort in knowing that if everything we did today fails, no one will know that there was supposed to be a summary video that didn't happen. So literally nothing we're doing here matters. And he was
sometimes
like,
that's comforting.
Like, okay, yeah. I was like, yep, this can completely fail and nobody will know. That's what I did at State. Something that like had it totally bombed. We just would have cut it from the program and nobody would have been any wiser.
But instead, it came together and it looked so cool. And as Mike warned during the judges meeting, it was so loud.
Holy crap. I felt that.
To be fair, you and
I head to the bottom of my toes, and we were in the front row.
You to take photos, me to take photos to post to the WFCA Twitter account. Because even though I'm not on communications, Mike was just like, "You're young. You did this previously. Please do this for me again." And I was like, "Okay."
I need a youth to post on Twitter.
Get me one of them there millennials. Oh, sorry, Mike. This is not an impression of you. This is just us being so tired, or in my case, being so tired. But yeah, I felt it shaking my body.
Oh yeah, there was bass.
The kids were so hyped about it.
Speakers.
And that's what's important, is that the kids were so into it and they were so hyped about it. I will say,
excited to see themselves and their teammates.
Yeah, I think that in the future that video would be great to play right before we start the actual reading of the awards, because we sort of got the kids all hyped up and amped to then listen to a bunch of adults talk.
Oh, very true. Yeah, very true. That would have been. So
I think if we had had our tournament host greet us, and then John Rademacher had arranged for former speech and debater, now state representative Malyssa Sargent, to speak, which was super cool. And then we gave out scholarships and also the Hints Award for coaching. But I think if we had then put the video after that stuff to then get all of us re-energized again, I feel like it would have helped with the pacing a bit. Because, as you and I pointed out, pacing sort of fell away.
Yeah.
Gotta consider the pacing, y'all.
Well, the thing I kind of leaned over and whispered to you at one point, too, is like something a lot of people don't think about is that like emceeing, like a good master of ceremonies, like that's a tough gig, and not everybody's good at it naturally. Even people who are like really well spoken, articulate, smart, people, like still it's a whole separate talent to be able to be a master of ceremonies, to MC an event, to read the room, to know when you need to move on, to be able to crack a joke, to be able to, make people feel welcomed and as though they are a part of the ceremony and not just watching what's happening. It's like a thing, and it not everybody has it. And I do think one thing that the WFCA should consider is maybe figuring out who's good at that and letting them be the master of ceremonies for a few years, and like let somebody get good at it and then train the next person to do it. Mike, when he was on the podcast, I forget if he mentioned this on the podcast or just in conversation, he felt strongly that the president of the organization, who this year is John Rademacher, should be the one who kind of MCs the ceremony, because he's the president and he's, should be a visible part of the ceremony as it is. And while I agree with all of that, it also, like, John had so many other things to worry about that day. And then also, now you're emceeing the ceremony. And I was in the room as they were like figuring out the order and who was going to do what. And so I hate to criticize people who mean so well. And I do love all of these people. And I hope they know this is not personal, but I do think one thing, if I was to criticize the state tournament, is that not a lot of thought was put into that ceremony itself. Like a lot of time and energy went into like the opening part of it, and the look of it. But then, and like getting a representative from the state, like all the elements were thought of in advance. But when it came time to like put them all together and then make it happen, that was kind of happening in the room the day of. And I think, again, that being an MC is a special skill.
Kirt, can I interrupt you for some breaking news?
Yes, Melissa, you may.
There's a third person on our podcast recording.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh my God, it's
Nice.
Antonio! Ladies and gentlemen, Antonio Trinidad.
Hi, long-time listener, second-time caller.
This time it's not a surprise for Melissa like last time.
Yeah, this time I knew it was coming. To be fair, didn't know at what point we were recording that you would come in, so still sort of a surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured it out.
You did
I'm glad
it.
I'm here.
Awesome. So we're just kind of talking about like the highs and let's say mediums. We won't say lows, the highs and mediums of the state tournament. Were there any highlights for you that you wanted to talk about?
Because you were there too.
Yeah, so I was just a normal judge. And so the high for me was just seeing some awesome competitors. You're probably going to get to the segment at the end of the best thing we saw of the week. But I saw a really awesome informative round for prelims.
Hooray!
Yeah, I don't know who the person was, but she did a speech about decision fatigue, and it was just really good.
Oh.
Wow. That's one I haven't heard of before.
Yeah, so whoever you're out there, lady, I'm going to assume, good job.
Cool.
Ringing endorsement.
Yeah. If you're the lady who did a speech about decision fatigue, let us know. We'll shout you out.
Yeah. Round 2.
Yeah.
An Asian guy judged you, and I liked it.
That's awesome. Melissa, was there anything else, or Antonio? Highlights, lowlights?
Yeah. The low was probably, I think you covered it already, but the low was probably the food for me.
And that's okay. But we've given our notes. We're going to work on it.
Not only did we cover it, we even debated it for a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it's us.
Yeah. And so at the end of the, so I left right after I judged my final round. But through the day, I was just thinking, what special thing are we going to give these kids? Because I remember being a student at Ripon, and I remember even though if you didn't break, we had this little thing where we would go to the ice cream shop down below the hill in Ripon. And so I wish there was, I think, a little more special things to do for these kids. Because, they work so hard. So I think that's the only thing I wish they had more of.
Yeah, because I love the physical participant ribbon that all the students were wearing. I loved how that looked, all of them in the hallways wearing those. But yeah, my kids did comment on how bored they were. I sent them outside. They I was like, go outside. Yeah, because it's beautiful out. Some of them did that.
It was a good day.
Yeah, because on a college campus they can go wander into a merch store, or they can go eat food somewhere else that's nearby and make a decision that way. But they're not a ton to occupy time there. Yeah,
and it's a good thing that there isn't, because I guess the other side of it is they can just focus on competition.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Although there is something to be said for holding state at a college or university. And Mike said that in the episode last week too, that, he was really trying to think of ways to make the day feel special, since it was going to be at a high school, and all of these kids exist in their day-to-day life at a high school. So, right. And I do think I wanted to talk about the ribbon because I did think the ribbon looked super cool on those kids walking through the hallways. I was super stoked to see them, to see most of the competitors wear it all day long.
Yes. And also there were lots of different ways that kids were wearing them too, which I was like, yes, for creativity.
And I'm like, boo, and I like the idea that just wear it on your lapel.
Not everyone wears a blazer, Kirk Graves. Dang. But also, I like the idea that because Mike had said the intention is to have them be a different color and a little bit different every year. So the idea of kids getting to collect them as they attend the state tournament, I just really like that idea. I like that as a little souvenir.
Yeah.
Agreed. I'm trying to think if there's anything else we really need to talk about. I do want to make sure that we say, as a part of this podcast, a huge thank you to the tournament director, Mike Tross, and his wife, Deb Wiretrost,
Mike and Deb,
who put in so much time and effort into making that state tournament happen. I got a message. Malyssa and I actually both got a message from Mike today talking about what the experience was and how grateful he was for all of the help and all of the people who gave their time and energy to make the day successful. He also posted that on his Facebook account. So rather than like reading you his whole message, I'm just going to say, go look at his message on Facebook if you were involved, because he thanks many people there personally, and talks about just how important the state tournament was and how much work it was and how grateful he was for all the help that he got. But that is what Mike wants to do. He's going to try to make it seem like other people did more work when in fact he put in so much time and energy and deserves a huge thank you from the WFCA for doing that. And so thank you to Mike Tross and to Deb for making that happen. Literally, it could not have happened without you.
Too true.
Thanks, Mike and Deb.
Yeah. All right, so that is our state recap. Let's jump into one of our last two Categlorious discussions, and that would be, what are we talking about today, guys? Drum roll.
Group interpretation. Oh, damn it.
No, you did it. You did good. You did good.
I can do the drum roll.
That was
Group interpretation.
Well, Melyssa's broken. It's going to take a while for her to come back from this.
It was just a perfect demonstration of our friendship, but now it's recorded for prosperity.
Nice.
Yeah.
Anyway, group interpretation.
Yeah.
Binders.
Yeah, so this is one of, I'm really excited because this is probably my favorite category to coach and to judge. So I guess we can start by, giving the direct definition from our organization.
Oh my God, who is the host of this podcast now? Excuse me, Mr. Trinidad.
Oh gosh.
We get you on the microphone and you just take over.
Yeah.
It's fine. Go ahead. I'll just hang back.
Go for it. I'll just keep laying here. We'll just keep laying. You got this. Take it away.
Yeah,
by the way, your microphone sounds so good. It sounds really good. Your voice sounds warm and buttery and amazing.
Thank you.
So yeah,
okay, so
tell us the definition.
Yeah. Contrary to dramatic performance, the challenge of this category is to present a literary script in such a manner that the audience imagines action being described rather than witnessing it being performed. Symbolic characterization and vocal and physical action rather than a literal dramatization or pantomime is required. So what that says to me in a nutshell is that you take anything you want, a newspaper column, a prose or a poetry, a program, and you do whatever you can to be creative with it, weave these pieces together, and don't, you have that, acting versus interpreting, right? That's a whole discussion you guys have so ongoingly. So the first thing we should talk about is how to properly judge and coach a good group interp. So we have to define what dramatization is, right? So I think if you think about dramatization, you have to think of what categories we have that are like group interp. So I would go to things like duo and play acting. So my advice first and foremost to coaches is to build group interpretation materials that don't imitate a drama script or gestures and blocking that mimic what a play acting might look like or what a duo might look like for that matter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're doing great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I judged group interp a couple times this season, and it's interesting to see how groups of maybe two people would perform their group interp just like how, say, a duo might perform their group interp.
Yeah.
which
There's
is
a lot of that right now.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about that on the pod. If not, we've certainly talked about it in private, how closely aligned so many group interp and duo performances are starting to look, and play acting as well.
We did it when we talked about play acting, about how so many play actings now are just two people and how they're not taking advantage of all the aspects of play acting. And group interp is the same way. A lot of group interps are just two folks, but luckily the final stage did not reflect that yesterday. There were some, I do believe the state champions were a group of 3 actually. So
they were,
group of 3 girls from Appleton East.
Antonio, before we get too deep into the category discussion, I do want to find out, like, I mean, I know this about you, but for our listening audience, like, what's your experience working with group interp? Are you like one of the more successful coaches to have ever worked with group interp and group because they like just go out and win all the time? Is that part of your reputation?
Yeah. So for the 3 years I was a head coach at St. Lawrence, I was really lucky to have a lot of good groups, and we managed to get state championship for every year I was a head coach. So yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, and so it's just there's so much that goes into it. Why I love the category, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. How about you, Malyssa? What's your experience with group interp?
Group interp is definitely more of Ben's thing on our team. I've had some okay group interps. I think I've had state finalist 1 year, but otherwise it's not really something
2015.
Oh, thank you. It's not something that I'm really known for.
Okay. And I'm a recent convert to the group interp. I used to think it was silly and weird, but it wasn't until I started working with a group of 3 girls a few years ago in group interp that I realized how much fun it can be if you're working with students who, one, want to work together more than they want to do an individual category, and who do work together well and can have fun with it, and are open to trying new things and taking guidance. And those 3 girls, I'm happy to say, were state finalists this year in their senior year. And so I was so excited to see them do that. And they did that. And their current coaches will back me up on this. I've talked to them about it. They did that all on their own. Like, they took what we worked on for the last couple of years and just applied it and came up with their own stuff. And I'm so incredibly happy that they got to that final stage, because they deserve it.
Yeah. And I think a reason why a lot of coaches don't have too much involvement in group interp is, unlike other categories, besides play acting, I think there comes more practicalities with the category. Tom Harden of James Madison Memorial, or previously James Madison Memorial, told me at a meeting once, he said, "You know why you have the best group?" That was a horrible Tom Harden impersonation, but
I loved it.
Sounded good to me.
Yeah, he said it's because all my students have the same damn schedule. And it's true. So I went at St. Lawrence, it was a boarding school. So my kids woke up at the same time, they ate at the same time, went to bed. So it was really easy for us to find a time to practice. They knew they were going to the same tournaments. So one of the rules I had at my team was all the members of the group had to be, at the same extracurricular activity. So I either had a group of, say, all basketball players or wrestlers, or none of them were any of the above. So the practicalities of, you could practice at a good amount of time or go to the same tournaments, so we could ensure that.
That's so smart, but also sounds so hard.
Yeah, it's difficult. And I think it's an anomaly at St. Lawrence where, like I said, everyone has the same schedule. So it was easy for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you still had to be good at it once you got them in that practice room.
Yeah.
So, like, where do you start? Like, when it came time to find a piece, what were you looking for?
So I wove my group interps the same way as I made my farragos. So, I like really strung out, really long group interps. Back in the day when it was 12 minutes, I'd have them 12 minutes and 10 seconds long. But the way I start first is you make the members, right? And so what I liked about group interpretation was it was awesome to have even the most inexperienced forensicators in it. And so I think it was nice because my group interpreters were jocks or were people who were star soccer basketball players and who did well because they were in a group. So it's that whole aspect of the power of being in a group, you know?
They're
And
used to
so-
working in a team.
Yeah, that's true too. But the line of, I was in an all boys school, right? So it's like you're less ashamed to show your emotions as long as there are other people around you who are doing the same thing, right?
Okay.
And so one of the proudest moments that I had as a coach was I was taking these students who were star basketball players who probably would have never gone to or did forensics if they were more in a more contemporary kind of school, but who were state champions or who were really good at forensics. So yeah, when I made these pieces, the first thing I started to think of was a theme. So I've had different themes in the past, like the different levels of how we express love as a man from when we're younger to you're older, or the struggles of dating, or the power of dancing, right?
I remember it well.
Yeah. So with finding these pieces, I usually come across a piece that I like and I build from that. But with say like dancing, I knew I wanted to do something with that since I had a group of dancers. So fast forward, let's say we find these pieces. And in most cases, my students will find these pieces on what? What do you think?
The internet.
YouTube, right? Yeah, the internet. And so a rule that I had forced was that a YouTube clip could not have more than 1 million views. And then once that student showed me that video, they weren't able to watch it anymore.
Oh.
So I would go ahead and type it for them so that they wouldn't get the speaker's interpretation or the poet's interpretation in their mind. Because at the end of the day, what I'm trying to teach these kids is how to interpret the lines they see in front of them with their own vision,
That's a good rule.
So I would type it out for them. Then we would start practicing. So I printed out all these materials, give them all scripts. And before we even stand up to read, I would sit down with my students and we would read the script line by line. And the way we would read the script was in succession. So we can try this out. So I had one student read a line, and once that student was done at a certain phrase or stanza, the next student would read. So we can try this. So we'll do Mary Had a Little Lamb, and Kirt can be 2, and Malyssa can be the third person. So
am I supposed
Mary
to
had a little,
know what Mary Had a Little Lamb is?
Yeah,
I'm supposed to know the lines. Antonio, I never did group interp.
Okay, I can be all 3 people. So Mary Had a Little Lamb.
I pulled it up. I got it on Wikipedia. I'm good.
Awesome. So Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow.
And everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was shorter.
Was sure to go.
Yeah.
Woo!
So after we would read it once, then Kirt, the second student, would start with the first line. And we would do this a handful of times. So I would hear which student had the best interpretation or voicing of that line. So when all is said and done, all of my students would have read each line. And then I would go the next day and think, who said Mary Had a Little Lamb the best? And so I would give that student the line, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was kind of like an auditioning of who said the line the best. And then after that, I had to make sure that there was an equal distribution. So we, of course, did highlighting. So every kid had their own highlighter, and yellow would signify that, everyone would have that line. And then so after we did the distributing of lines, then we had the cool stuff. So we would add the gestures and the movements. And the thing about group interpretation, I think a lot of kiddos have trouble with, is that they just move just to move and to look cool versus moving with a sense of symbolism. And so a good example I could give was we would have a line. One of my group interps had this line about their heart being broken. And so my kiddos would take their hand out and kind of place it on the student who was saying that line. And they would do the, and, give that line more meaning with their movement, And then we would draw out the movement simply by, it was kind of like football. So we would have these X's on a pieces of paper, and you would see where you'd move for the next line. Sports references, right?
It's so sportsy.
I know what you're referencing thanks to TV.
Yep, I was going to say, I've watched 2 seasons of Friday Night Lights. I get it.
Oh, come on. There was a football team on Glee.
Yeah, that's right.
So
I forgot their name.
It doesn't matter, but I know what you're referencing. Circles and X's, and then there were like arrows pointing them in different directions.
And and that's how we would do the movements. And now we can talk about binder tech, Melyssa's favorite thing, right?
I love binder tech so much.
Yeah, and so it goes up with every other category, but there's so much you could do, I think, in group interp, because there's, you potentially have 5 binders coming at you. And so what I appreciate about group interp when I see them is when I see kids being really creative. This is the first year where I saw kiddos using their clip as like I think a door opened and they unlatched a clip, and then they all 5 of them would clip it again to make that that sound. I've seen kiddos scratch their binders or slam their binders, or use their binders for simple blocking maneuvers.
Can I interrupt for just 1 second?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Those group interp girls I referenced earlier were just telling me about this at the state tournament, because this is not the first year that clip thing has happened. They did it in their piece last year, and they were telling me, she's like, one of the girls was like, you would like 3 or 4 groups are doing that now. And I was like, well, good. That means you started something.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are the types of things that you should be super proud of when somebody copies something you did.
Yep.
Don't get mad.
Yeah, exactly.
Just be happy that something you did was awesome enough that somebody decided to emulate it. And that's thanks to Malyssa strongly advocating binder tech. Because now that we can use binders, the binders can not only move in space, but they can also make noise.
Yeah.
It just makes it cool.
Yeah, especially with these girls who won first place in group interpretation. They do a particular scary piece, and so they use their binders to make sounds to be creepy, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And so once I have a group interp, and we have them up and they're actually doing their pieces, I do specific things as a coach to bring that interpretation even more to life. And so when they're performing, a group interpretation is a good group if they do everything the same voice, the same volume, same facial expression. So what I'll do is when they're performing, I'll stand in front of them and I'll have them match my facial expressions. We would sometimes go down to the mat room where there was a bunch of mirrors. So I'd have them see themselves while they're performing. And I'd make sure they're doing things like their binder were at the same, we're all at the same heights, that they're doing the movements at the same time. So that's something else I did.
More people should practice in front of mirrors. I 100% recommend, especially if it's a duo or group interp or play acting, so that you have more spatial awareness of what the other people are doing. Mirrors, practice in front of them.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And do that, when you're kind of along the lines of you're already performing and you're pretty good. It's just more to tweak certain things.
Yeah.
Another big thing.
Sometimes they just don't know what you're like. They sometimes just can't see each other.
Right.
And it's the same way when you're like learning a dance. Like There's a reason dance studios have a full wall of mirrors. It's so that you can see someone from the front and back. And so when you try to say like, Susie, make your hand look more like Bobby,
they can't see.
Like Susie can't see Bobby, but like when there's mirrors, she can look at Bobby and be like, oh, now I get what you were trying to say about having my hand that certain way.
Exactly. Another thing I look out for a really good group interp is whenever you're not saying a line, I like you to still tell me what the speaker is saying through your face. So acting when you're not speaking, you know?
It's a huge problem that I think that people have in group interp is that people believe that unless you're talking, you don't have to do anything. And that's not true. Like I've written that on so many group interp critique sheets, like figure out a way to either be reacting to the thing that they're doing or to be involved in the thing they're doing rather than just looking down at your binder.
Yeah. The other thing too that I see sometimes with group interp groups is the only person moving will be the person speaking. And I think that there's so much opportunity to be had in having, even when you're not the person speaking or reciting the lines, you can be adding to the interp by moving with the group or move. Sometimes the person speaking stands still and everybody else moves around them. That works too.
Yeah. Which is, the element that I talked about being creative. It's the best group interps find these ways to be creative and to bring the piece more to life, But
in a way that supports the story being told and or the piece of writing that's being recited.
Exactly.
Like one thing I remember about seeing your dance piece, Antonio, is that like it was spoken word poetry for the most part. Yes.
Yep.
And so like that really allowed that group to be very creative in how they used the space because it wasn't, a monologue or a piece of prose where it had to kind of stay grounded in a way. Like with spoken word, you could feel free to like, as you did, like literally represent the beating of a heart because it's part of a poem. And that's
right.
That was super effective and something that I hadn't seen a lot of people doing before. Like a lot of prose or a lot of group interp is still telling a standard story. There's, from start to finish, a beginning, a middle, and an end, which I still like, and you can still find a ton of creativity with. But by not being so structured in the composition of the piece, your students were allowed to also not be so structured in their movement.
Yeah, and it's just so difficult. I give kudos and props to these coaches who can do the 10-minute group interp, single prose or a single poem. I just found so much difficulty with that.
I genuinely never did it for my kids. They always had to find the piece themselves. So they found it, they cut it, and then I helped them with the distributing of lines. And also, too, like you were talking about the process of initially distributing lines. I found that often once we got to the movement portion of putting together a group interp, that changed frequently. Like, oh, now it doesn't make sense to have this person say it, so you're going to swap sentences. Or like, oh, what would be really cool is if instead of just having one person say it, if you all said it, or if you said it in an echo, or if you like one person said it angrily and one person said it quiet. Like there's so many different ways that you can play with that once you get the piece up on its feet. Mm-hmm. So as with many of the categories we've talked about, guys, it's not it's not something that's set in stone. Feel free to change it as often as you want, especially before you start getting to competition. Like you don't, just because you highlighted something in yellow on a piece of paper does not mean it always has to stay that way.
Right. And another thing I did with my group interps, I made sure that they're pretty sorry, I'm losing my words. I had my groups interps have a good mix of ages. So with my groups of 5, I would have a member be a freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. So that way, the next year after my senior graduated, I wouldn't have to start over with a new group, and I had a strong foundation to build off already. I also found myself holding practices with other kiddos watching group interp, because in many situations I've had a group member kicked out of the school or on academic probation, and that way the student who was watching could, jump in if I needed someone to come in, like a sub in sports.
Or an understudy in theater.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melissa. I was about to say it. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's all the notes I have. I'm trying to think.
I think, group interp is one of those things that, like I said, I didn't get it until I got it. And so one thing I just want to put out into the world is that if you are a coach who doesn't get group interp, if you're a judge who just doesn't get group interp, like, try to keep an open mind, because you never know what it is that you're going to see someday, or what group of kids you might work with someday who opens your eyes to the possibilities of any category, but group interp especially. It's one of the odd ones. And I know it's one of the ones that I hear the most often from people, that they have trouble understanding it or have trouble embracing it. And part of that is that it can be so different from group to group. And then they're confused as to, like, well, how do I judge it? And I guess it's just like, what did you like the most? And also, sometimes you can like something even if you don't fully understand it or like it. You can still appreciate the work that was put into it, and you can see, how polished the performance is, or how much you liked the story that was told. There's so many things you can like about it, even if the form of it, you think, the thing I hear too often is it's too busy. It's too much movement. And it's like, and that's a critiquable thing.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, and I think I've talked to other coaches about group interp before, and I think they find difficulty with it because they don't want to put their best interpreters in a group of 5 competition wise, because that's only one entry.
Yeah.
Versus spreading your talent out. But I found that if that's the case, you just double enter or triple enter those kiddos.
And that's something we can do now. That's one of the advantages of having just about every tournament now be a double entry tournament, and many of them triple entries.
Yeah.
Is there something in particular that kids learn from being in group interp that they don't get somewhere else?
I've found that a lot, the group interp category specifically, it's very loving. My kiddos always made really good friends with groups from other schools. So I think group interp in itself in the WFCA was very cliquey. So I think that was pretty cool about the category.
Yeah, it's almost like there's something about... Sorry, go ahead, Melissa.
Oh, no, I was going to say, like, there's something to be said for the fact that, like, because you have to show empathy and compassion to the people that are in your group interp, whether it's one person or 4 other people, it allows those kids to then extend that compassion to their fellow competitors, which you hope would happen in all categories. But I agree that it is a little bit more prevalent in a category like group interp.
Yeah, building off of that, what I was going to say is just because you have to share the stage, essentially you have to remove part of your ego from the equation. Yeah. And you have to accept that part of your final score, your final fate, your final ranking is in the hands of somebody else. And so I think, removing that element of ego also probably, it makes it a little bit easier to then interact with the other competitors in your room, because you're not an island of one in the room competing for yourself. You by necessity of the category have to be open to interacting with somebody else and knowing it's not all on you.
Right.
That you are in, to a degree, you're all in it together. And I feel like forensics kids get there, as they compete over the years, and even just like from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. But it makes sense that group interp would have that happen faster.
Yeah. And along those lines, it's like, I think there's way more pressure to mess up in a group. For example, one of Martin's kiddos dropped their paper during the final round of group interp, which is, just feels so horrible. So that pressure of, if you're the one who messes up, you mess the whole thing up, it's there.
Yeah.
I also think that group interp teaches you what it means to contribute your strengths to like a greater result. Like, you make the smart coaching decision of figuring out what those student strengths are and helping them fit into the slots that best support those. But I think group interp shows, like, there's always the kid in the group interp who's like the team leader. There's the one who's like the mom of them, who's making sure everyone's showing up on time. Like, outside of just like the performance aspect, it teaches you how to contribute to a group.
Right.
Which sounds like a crazy thing, but there are lots of people who get out into the world and they don't work well in group situations because they don't understand how to not necessarily play nicely, but how to bring their best self to the table in order to contribute the best aspect that they can to the final project.
And allow others to shine as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what are some memorable performances of group interp that you guys have seen?
You can go first, Malyssa.
Oh no. I mean, I got to see both the North girls from this year and this year's state champions, who are doing a very unconventional style of group interp where it's based in more of a suspense building rather than a building of a laugh. And I really appreciate that. I'm so sorry for yawning. It's so late.
It is late.
But I'm excited to see where the category goes because of people starting to now finally take risks in group interp, because for a very long time in coaching group interp, it was only just silly stuff. There was no space for serious group interps for so long. And now we are changing the tides of it, and it makes me really happy.
And that's one of the things I try to mold my group interps around, is I really appreciated programs, and it's just not group interp, but programs that had a little bit of funniness to them, or had a really, dramatic emotional impact. So having a variety of emotions is a really makes a good group interp. But my favorite showcase of group interp, and you can actually watch it because it's on the WFCA website, but it was the state finals of 2016 of group interp. And the girls who actually won group interp this year, they're in that. They were doing another scary piece too that year, but that year was just a really good good year for group interp. And it's funny because all the while, because Malyssa, you said it used to be all silly, but today it seems to be all serious group interps. And I think that's why we kind of had a leg up on everybody, is because we did have that funny aspect to it. And another thing that's interesting is why are there mostly all girl group interps?
Because boys drool and girls rule.
Yeah, so that was an interesting aspect of the category.
Yeah, maybe teenage girls are more willing to work with other people.
They're just cooler and smarter and better than you guys. Just deal with it.
All right. I'm willing to accept it.
Yeah.
Kirt, do you have one that stands out for you?
Not one. I mean, I do have to say, like, Antonio, your group from a couple years ago, the ones who did the dancing piece, like, that shifted something in my mind about what group interp could be.
Yeah.
Because I had always thought of it as more of a traditional story, just split up into different lines. And that was also the same year I was working with those girls for the first time. So like my brain was cracked open already as to like how much fun could be had in the category. So
Yeah.
I do remember very specifically the first time I got to see them. And there was a group interp from App East, much like the state champions this year, back when I was competing. And I remember their black suits with their red shirts. And they did a scary piece, like a suspenseful, like ghost story. And I remember they used sound very specifically, not only adding vocal sound effects to their piece, but also just the way they played with pitch and with volume. And like they were clearly all singers because they could modulate their voices in ways that just sounded really cool together. And so I remember that being a very cool effect, but also thinking at the time, like it would really take a group of people who like they would have had to have all been singers in order to make that work. You don't always get that specific talent in a group interp, but I do recall that from my high school years as one of the performances that stood out and made me go, wow, being in a group could be really cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you could do.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Antonio. It was great to have you back on the pod. Let's make it happen again sometime soon, okay?
For sure.
Excellent. And I guess the last thing I'll say is like it's 10:30 at night right now.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So what's going to happen, friends of the pod, is I will release this episode on Monday, but it's going to be later than normal because I'm going to go to bed and I will edit this episode tomorrow. So you will see it in your feed sometime in the morning, but not at 5 a.m.
Oh, darn. It's so silly that you're saying this because they'll already be listening to this after it's happened.
True, but now they're getting an explanation as to why it was late.
Because it's 10:34 and I am... Why are we... This is awful.
Well, it won't last much longer. I did just want to say one...
If not for Antonio's wonderfulness, I would not be here.
Thank you, Malyssa, for letting me know that. I appreciate that. I would not be enough of a draw. It's for Antonio.
Yeah.
Thanks. I had to deliver food to make money for grad school.
Yeah. I want to address one thing before we get off the pod, which is that I had several people talk to me at the state tournament about the podcast in general, but several people who specifically mentioned our episode about the George Mason University sexual harassment scandal, the special pod that we did a couple weeks ago. And I just wanted to say thank you for that affirmation. I was nervous to put that out in the world, but I'm glad that it was helpful to people and glad that it helped create more conversations. So thank you guys for that. And I was happy to hear your feedback and will be happy to hear your feedback about any of the episodes we do from here on out. It's been a pleasure talking to people.
Though. Maybe not this one, though.
Oh my God, they're going to have so many great... About Antonio
how
and how great
Antonio
he was?
is. Yeah.
I want to hear that.
Only Antonio. Melissa would not like feedback about herself in this episode.
But sometimes that's when we need it the most.
Oh my God, I hate you right now. Just kidding. I love you both so much. Thank you, Antonio.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's all say goodbye. Bye.
Good night.
Forensics Faces is proudly produced in Wisconsin, the birthplace of the National Forensics League. Our theme song was written and performed by JJ Hameister.
Yep, that's not how he says his name.
I want to keep it so bad.
Okay, we're keeping it. If you're a fan of Forensics Faces, the best way to support the podcast is to leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. You can get in touch with Malyssa and me by emailing listen@forensicsfaces.com.
You can also find all the links to our social media accounts and online merch store by going to our website, forensicsfaces.com.
I'm Kirt.
I'm Antonio.
And I'm Malyssa, encouraging you to listen.
Think.
And speak.
Preferably in that order.
I'm so sorry.
Ding 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 ding
Ding ding ding ding ding ding ding ding ding ding.